The sky over Tarawa was thick with smoke and death. It was November 21st, 1943, just after noon, and Lieutenant Jack "Inverted" Morrison was circling at 8,000 feet in his F-6F-3 Hellcat, watching the disaster unfold below him. On the beaches of Betio Island, hundreds of Marines were pinned down, dying in the surf. Japanese machine gun nests, dug deep into concrete bunkers along the seawall, were cutting them to pieces. Jack's fuel gauge was hovering near empty. His wingman had been shot down 20 minutes earlier. Radio chatter screamed with desperate calls for air support, for anything that could silence those guns. But standard strafing runs weren't working. Every pilot who dove at those bunkers came in at the wrong angle, their bullets bouncing harmlessly off reinforced concrete, while anti-aircraft fire shredded their planes. Jack keyed his radio. "Blue Leader to control. I'm making one more pass." "Negative, Blue Leader. RTB, your bingo fuel." Jack didn't respond. He rolled his Hellcat inverted, pulled back on the stick, and dove straight down toward the beach, upside down. This is the story of the most unconventional attack run of the Pacific War, and the pilot crazy enough to fly it. The Battle of Tarawa was supposed to be quick. Intelligence had assured Admiral Nimitz that preliminary bombardment would soften Japanese defenses enough for the 2nd Marine Division to walk ashore and secure the island within a day. Instead, it became one of the bloodiest 76 hours in Marine Corps history. The problem was simple, but deadly. The Japanese had transformed Betio, a tiny coral atoll barely 2 miles long, into a fortress. 4,000 Imperial Japanese Navy troops occupied over 500 pillboxes, bunkers, and gun emplacements made from coconut logs, steel, and reinforced concrete. They had interlocking fields of fire covering every inch of beach. When the Marines waded ashore on November 20th, they walked into a meat grinder. The coral reef was the first betrayal. Landing craft grounded 500 yards from shore, forcing Marines to wade through chest-deep water while Japanese machine guns raked them from elevated positions. Men fell by the dozens, their bodies tumbling in the surf. Those who made it to the beach found themselves trapped against a 4-foot seawall with nowhere to go. Behind them, the ocean was littered with dead Marines. Ahead, concrete bunkers spat fire. By the 2nd day, nearly 1,500 Marines were dead or wounded. The beachhead was collapsing. Something had to give. That's when Jack Morrison arrived. Jack Morrison grew up in Wichita, Kansas, the son of a crop duster pilot who flew a beat-up Stearman every summer, spraying pesticides over wheat fields. Jack learned to fly when he was 14, sneaking into his father's plane and taking it up at dawn. His father caught him once, landing just as the sun broke over the horizon. "You trying to kill yourself?" his father had shouted. "No, sir," Jack replied, "just trying to see things different." That phrase became Jack's motto. When he enlisted in the Navy after Pearl Harbor, he carried it with him through flight training at Pensacola. While other cadets practiced by-the-book maneuvers, Jack experimented. He'd roll inverted and fly level upside down for minutes at a time, feeling how the controls responded, learning the aircraft's limits in ways the instructors never taught. His squadron mates started calling him inverted as a joke. Jack wore it like a badge. By November 1943, Jack was a seasoned combat pilot with 7 confirmed kills, assigned to VF-1 on the USS Yorktown. He'd flown dozens of ground attack missions, strafing Japanese positions across the Gilbert Islands. But Tarawa was different. Tarawa was hell. On his first pass over Betio that morning, Jack had tried the standard approach, a 30-degree dive from 1,200 feet, guns blazing, targeting the bunkers near the seawall. His 650 caliber machine guns chewed up sand and coral, but the rounds skipped off the angled concrete like stones on water. Anti-aircraft tracers crisscrossed the sky around him. One burst tore through his left wing, punching a hole the size of a dinner plate. Jack pulled up hard, banking away, his heart hammering. Below, the Marines were still dying. He climbed back to altitude and thought about his father's crop duster, how it would dive almost vertical when spraying tight corners, how angle mattered more than speed sometimes. An idea formed. Dangerous, maybe impossible, but an idea. In standard ground attack doctrine, a fighter pilot approaches the target in a shallow dive, 20 to 30 degrees, firing from 1,500 feet down to 500 feet before pulling out. This gives the pilot time to aim, fire, and escape. But it also means the bullets strike at an angle, which is fine for soft targets, but useless against fortified bunkers with sloped walls designed to deflect fire. What Jack realized was that the Japanese bunkers had one weakness: their firing slits. These narrow, horizontal openings, designed to give defenders a field of fire while staying protected, were vulnerable only from a near vertical angle. But no fighter could fly vertically downward in controlled flight and still fire accurately. The plane would stall, spin, or simply crash. Unless you flew it upside down. When an aircraft is inverted, the control surfaces work in reverse. Pulling back on the stick makes the nose pitch up. But when you're upside down, up means toward the ground. By rolling inverted at altitude and pulling back, a pilot could enter a controlled vertical dive with the aircraft's engine still producing power, maintaining airspeed and stability. The problem was visibility. Flying upside down meant looking up at the ground through the canopy, tracking a target while blood rushed to your head and your instruments spun backward. It also meant your guns would fire from an inverted position, the tracer rounds arcing in ways your brain wasn't wired to calculate. Jack had practiced inverted flight hundreds of times, but he'd never tried inverted strafing. No one had. There was no manual for this, no doctrine, just desperation and geometry. He made his decision. Jack pulled his Hellcat into a hard climb to 9,000 feet, well above the effective range of Japanese anti-aircraft fire. He leveled off, took 3 deep breaths, and scanned the beach below. Through the haze of smoke and burning landing craft, he could see the specific bunker complex causing the worst carnage, a cluster of 4 reinforced positions at the center of the seawall, their interlocking fire pinning down at least 200 Marines. "Control,
This is Blue Leader. I'm going in hot. Blue Leader, you are bingo fuel. Return to base immediately. Negative. One more pass. Jack pulled the Hellcat inverted. The Pacific Ocean filled his canopy. His stomach lurched as gravity tried to pull him from his seat, held in only by his harness. He reached up, no, down, and adjusted the throttle, then pulled back gently on the stick. The Hellcat's nose pitched toward the ground. He was diving vertically, upside down at 300 knots. Blood pounded in his temples. His vision started to narrow. The altimeter unwound rapidly. 8,000, 7,000, 6,000 feet. Below him, or above him, depending on perspective, the bunkers grew larger. He could see the muzzle flashes from their guns, could see Marines huddled against the seawall. At 4,000 feet, the anti-aircraft fire found him. Tracers zipped past his canopy. One shell burst close enough to rock the plane. Jack ignored it. He was committed now. His thumb hovered over the gun trigger. He had to time this perfectly. Too early, and he'd miss. Too late, and he'd crash into the beach. 3,000 feet. The bunkers were directly in his line of sight now, their firing slits visible as dark rectangles against gray concrete. 2,000 feet. Jack squeezed the trigger. 6.5 caliber machine guns roared to life. The Hellcat shuddered. Hot brass flew upward, toward the cockpit floor, clattering against his boots. Tracer rounds streamed downward in a tight cone, moving faster than physics seemed to allow, because the plane itself was diving at terminal velocity. For 2 full seconds, Jack held the trigger down. His bullets entered the bunker's firing slits at a perfect 90-degree angle, ricocheting inside the concrete chambers like hornets in a jar. Men screamed. Ammunition cooked off. One bunker erupted in a secondary explosion, its roof lifting slightly before collapsing inward. 1,000 feet. Jack released the trigger and kicked the rudder hard, rolling the Hellcat back to upright while simultaneously pulling out of the dive. G-forces crushed him into his seat. His vision grayed. The engine screamed in protest. The Hellcat's wings bent visibly, stressed beyond their design limits. 500 feet. The plane leveled out just 20 feet above the surf, so low that his propeller wash kicked up spray. Jack banked hard left, avoiding the wreckage of a burning LST, and looked back over his shoulder. The 4 bunkers were silent. No muzzle flashes, no tracer fire. Marines were already moving forward, charging through gaps in the Japanese line. Jack's radio crackled. "Blue Leader, control! What the hell did you just do?" Jack didn't answer. His hands were shaking too badly to key the mic. His fuel warning light was blinking red. He turned toward the carrier group, nursing the throttle, and climbed slowly away from the island. He didn't feel heroic. He felt like he'd just survived his own funeral. Jack made it back to the Yorktown on fumes, his engine coughing and sputtering as he touched down on the flight deck. The flight captain who met him stared at the Hellcat's damaged wing and the scorched marks around the gun ports. "Sir, what happened to your aircraft?" Jack unbuckled his harness and climbed out on legs that barely held him. He said, "Physics." The Marines on Tarawa took the beachhead that afternoon. Intelligence reports later confirmed that Jack's vertical strafing run had killed 17 Japanese defenders and destroyed ammunition stockpiles inside 3 of the bunkers. But more importantly, it had broken the defensive line at a critical moment, allowing infantry to advance inland. When the after-action report reached Admiral Nimitz's desk, he read it 3 times. Then he called Jack's commanding officer. "Did this pilot really fly upside down to strafe bunkers?" "Yes, sir. Against orders." There was a long silence. Then, "Court-martial him or give him a medal. I can't decide which." In the end, they gave him the Navy Cross. But they also grounded him for 2 weeks while doctors checked him for brain damage from sustained inverted flight. They found nothing wrong physically. But Jack's eyes had changed. His squadron mates noticed it. He'd seen something up there, inverted and diving, that altered him. The tactic itself never made it into official doctrine. The Navy deemed it too dangerous, too unpredictable. But word spread among fighter pilots in the Pacific. A few tried it. Most failed. One crashed into the ocean trying. But a handful succeeded, using inverted dives to hit targets conventional strafing couldn't reach.
Jack Morrison survived the war. He flew 63 more combat missions, shot down 11 more enemy aircraft, and never once flew inverted in combat again. "Once was enough," he told a reporter in 1945. "I don't recommend it." After the war, he returned to Kansas and took over his father's crop dusting business. He flew the same beat-up Stearman his father had flown, spraying wheat fields at dawn. Sometimes when the sky was clear and no one was watching, he'd roll inverted for a few seconds, just to feel it again. That moment when gravity and flight became the same thing. He never talked about Tarawa, not to his wife, not to his children, not to the veterans of foreign wars post where he drank coffee on Sunday mornings with other quiet men who'd seen too much. But once a year, on November 21st, he'd drive to a small airfield outside Wichita, rent a plane, and fly alone. He'd climb to 9,000 feet, roll inverted, and look at the ground through the canopy, remembering the beach, the bunkers, the Marines pinned against the seawall. Then he'd roll upright, land, and go home. I've been asked what went through my mind during that dive. The truth is, I don't remember most of it. I remember rolling inverted. I remember the trigger. I remember pulling out and thinking I'd waited too long, that I was going to die. But the moment itself, the 2 seconds when my guns were firing and the bunkers were in my sights, that's gone. Maybe my brain couldn't process it. Maybe it was too fast. Or maybe some things you do in war aren't meant to be remembered clearly. Maybe they're meant to be felt, carried, and eventually forgiven. People call it a miracle shot, an impossible maneuver, the attack that saved the Beachhead. But I know the truth.
It was desperation given wings and gravity given permission. I was just the man who said yes. So let me ask you something. Not as a pilot, but as someone who stood at the edge and jumped. When the world asks for impossible, when conventional wisdom says there's no way forward, when lives hang in the balance and the manual offers no answers, what will you do? Will you roll inverted and dive, or will you circle until your fuel runs out? I've told you my story. Now I want to hear yours. What would you do? Let me know below.